The room smelled like roasted rosemary and baked cinnamon apples, but I swear I could feel the temperature drop as soon as the words left my mother's lips. "We've decided the estate will go to Riley," she said calmly, setting her fork down beside the half-eaten slice of turkey breast. "It just makes sense." There was no dramatic build-up. No hushed conversation pulled into a side room. She said it like she was talking about leftovers. I froze mid-sip, my wine glass hovering in the air, suddenly bitter in my mouth. My father chimed in before I could respond. "The lake house, the retirement savings, the investment accounts, all of it will be passed to your sister when the time comes. We wanted to be upfront about it." Across from me, Riley tilted her head, flashing the smug little grin she wore so well. "It's only fair," she added, swirling her glass of Chardonnay. "You barely helped them." I blinked. Once. Twice. The room felt like it had been dunked in ice water. Somewhere in the background, the hum of soft jazz played over the speakers, and the scent of gravy still lingered, but all of it was suddenly unbearable. "You're joking," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Right?" My mother gave a small sigh. "You're always working, Lucas. You're so distant from the family these days." I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You mean the same work that's paid for Dad's cardiologist? The prescription refills? The furnace repairs last winter? You know, those little emergencies you always forgot to budget for? My dad didn't even look up from his plate. You chose that job." Riley shrugged like she was bored already. "If you didn't want to help, you should have just said no. No one forced you." I clenched my jaw. Riley had always been good at that, dodging responsibility while cloaking herself in innocence. She hadn't worked a consistent job in years. Still lived at home at 31, floating from one half-baked plan to another, always calling herself an aspiring artist, though the only thing she ever painted was her nails. But me? I was the dutiful one. The responsible son. The provider. The invisible backbone of this family. Apparently, all that counted for nothing. I stood slowly, pushing back my chair. It made a loud scrape against the hardwood, drawing every eye in the room. Riley rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Another one of your dramatic walkouts?" I leaned forward, placing my palms on the edge of the table, voice calm. Too calm. "No," I said. "Just making an announcement." My mother's brow furrowed. "Lucas, don't make this into..." "I'm done," I said, cutting her off. "With everything. No more credit card payments. No more Venmo transfers. No more wiring money at 2 a.m. because you forgot to pay a bill again. If I'm not part of this family when it comes to your estate, then I'm not going to be part of it when it comes to your expenses." I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. "You can figure it out now, Riley. You're the favorite. The heir. The dependable one, right?" Her face twisted. "You can't just walk away." "Watch me," I said, already halfway to the door. Outside, the November wind cut through my jacket like needles, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I didn't feel shackled to guilt. I didn't feel like a servant waiting for crumbs of affection. I felt light. Cold, but free. I didn't answer their texts that night. Or the next day. Or the day after that. For a week, it was radio silence. Then came the calls. The first one was from my mother. "Missed call, Mom." "Missed call, Mom," 2 missed call, home line. I let them all go to voicemail. I knew exactly what this was. And I was right. By the 5th call, I finally picked up. "Lucas," she said, her voice breathy, like she'd been crying. "Can we talk?" I exhaled through my nose and leaned back into the couch. My apartment was quiet. Warm. Peaceful. The polar opposite of their house. "About what?" "Your father's blood pressure has been spiking. We're behind on a few bills." "Riley is." "She's trying, but she's overwhelmed." I raised an eyebrow. "Overwhelmed with what exactly? Watching Netflix?" She ignored the jab. "We could use some support." I stared at the ceiling, biting back a dozen things I wanted to say. Instead, I asked, "You mean money?" There was a pause. Then a guilty whisper, "Yes." I almost laughed. "You mean money from the son who doesn't help? The one who's not getting a dime when you're gone?" "Lucas, don't be cruel." "No," I said, my voice steel. "Cruel is ignoring your son's contributions until it's inconvenient. Cruel is handing over everything to the child who's never lifted a finger while the one who supported you gets nothing but demands." "We raised you," she said, her voice rising. "And I repaid you tenfold," I snapped. I did more for you than you ever did for me. And you repaid me with a slap in the face over mashed potatoes." She went silent. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. No guilt. No tears. Just freedom. That night, I went to sleep and didn't wake up once. No stress dreams. Number 2 a.m. panic about whether Dad's insurance had lapsed or if Riley had maxed out their card again. I slept. Like a human. Like a man no longer shackled by a family that only called when it needed a withdrawal. And for the first time in my adult life, I woke up happy. A week passed. Then 2. And for the first time in years, no one asked me for anything. No requests for a little help covering Dad's blood pressure meds. No emergency texts from Riley saying she forgot to pay the electric bill and now the fridge is off. No calls from Mom pretending to check in, only to pivot into the real reason she dialed: money. At first, the silence was eerie. Like the pause in a storm before the winds returned, harder than before. But after the third weekend of peace, something strange started to happen. I started to breathe easier. My shoulders dropped. My coffee tasted better. I even laughed, really laughed, during a movie. It was like I'd pulled a hook out of my chest that had been lodged there for over a decade. And I began to understand something that hurt more than anything they'd said to me. They didn't miss me. They missed the money. It didn't take long for that theory to prove true. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I came home from a long shift, 12 hours at the hospital, 3 of which had been spent trying to resuscitate a child we couldn't save, and as I peeled off my scrubs, my phone buzzed. "Mom." "Hi honey. Just checking in. Hope work's not too crazy. You really should take some time off soon. You deserve it." Red heart emoji. I stared at the message, then scrolled up. The last time she'd messaged me before the Thanksgiving disaster? 2 months earlier. When the furnace had broken and she'd asked for just $1,200 more. "Promise it's the last time." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another message came in. "We're struggling, Lucas. Riley is trying her best, but it's just not enough." I almost laughed. Riley trying her best was probably code for calling utility companies and crying over the phone until they extended the payment deadline. Then came the next message. "You work so hard, sweetie. We worry about you. Don't let bitterness poison your heart." There it was. The emotional manipulation. Classic Mom. When that didn't work, the gloves came off. "You're a doctor, Lucas. You make more than enough. It's not right to abandon your family." I didn't reply to any of them. So she tried a different tactic. She sent Riley. The call came in while I was standing in line at the pharmacy, picking up a prescription I had written for a patient I'd seen pro bono earlier that day. I almost declined the call when I saw her name flash across the screen. But then I remembered something. Riley hadn't spoken to me since Thanksgiving. Not a message. Not a meme. Nothing. She'd vanished like the ghost of all my resentments. Until now. Out of sheer curiosity, I picked up. Her voice hit me like a slap. Sharp. Entitled. Furious. "Wow. Took you long enough. I didn't even get a hello." "I'm sorry?" I replied, dry as sandpaper. "Are you seriously still ignoring Mom and Dad?" She snapped. "You're acting like a damn child." There it was. I sighed. "What do you want, Riley?" "I want you to stop being selfish and fix this. Mom is a wreck. Dad's missing his meds. The heating bill is overdue. I'm doing what I can, but you know I can't handle all this on my own." I smiled bitterly. "So now you're saying you can't live up to being the favorite?" Her voice sharpened. "Oh my God, are you still mad about that? Grow up." "No," I said evenly. "But you know what I am mad about? I'm mad that I covered thousands in bills for our parents while you contributed nothing. I'm mad that you sat there on Thanksgiving and smirked while they told me I wasn't getting a cent of the inheritance, even though I'd practically been keeping them alive for the past 5 years." There was a pause. Then she scoffed. "Wow. Petty much?" I took a breath, kept my voice low and lethal. "Petty is pretending you earned an inheritance you didn't work for. Petty is letting me cover everything while you painted and posted about your creative burnout on Instagram. Petty is only calling me now because your little throne is sinking, and you need a rescue boat." Silence. Then her voice softened, trying a new angle. "Lucas, look, I get it. You're angry. But we're still family. Family helps each other. You don't turn your back just because things get a little messy." I laughed. Out loud. Right there in line at the pharmacy. "No, Riley. You don't get it. I wasn't family. I was an ATM. And ATMs shut down when you try to overdraft one too many times. And I hung up. I expected that to be the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, I came home after a brutal overnight shift. My eyelids felt like sandpaper. My feet ached. My back screamed for sleep. All I wanted was to collapse. But there they were. Standing outside my apartment building like something out of a bad drama, my mom, my dad, and Riley. I stopped in my tracks in the parking garage. They spotted me before I could reverse out and drive away. "Lucas," my mother called, rushing toward me. I didn't smile. Didn't wave. Didn't slow down. When she reached for my arm, I pulled back. "What are you doing here?" I asked flatly. "We need to talk," my father said. His voice had lost all that usual thunder. Now it was hoarse. Hollow. "No," I said, stepping past them. "We don't. Lucas, please," my mom begged. "We didn't mean what we said on Thanksgiving." I stopped. Turned around slowly. "Yes. You did. You meant every word when you gave away the inheritance. When you dismissed everything I've ever done for you. When you said I barely help after I covered your hospital bills and groceries for 5 years. Okay, fine," Riley cut in. "You're mad. We get it. But you can't seriously just leave us like this." I stared at her. "I already did." She scoffed. "Oh, come on. Don't act like you're some martyr." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just done being your doormat." My mother's eyes glistened. "You'll regret this." I met her gaze. "No. I won't." And I walked inside. I didn't look back. I didn't check to see if they followed. Because this time, I knew something with absolute certainty. I was finally free. They say when you stop feeding a fire, it dies on its own. Turns out, when you stop feeding your family's delusions, they burn themselves out just as fast. It took exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks from the night they showed up at my building to the day I received the first real evidence of their unraveling. It came in the form of a text message. Not from my mother. Not from Riley. But from Uncle Henry, my dad's older brother. The only relative who'd ever pulled me aside at a holiday and whispered, "You deserve better than this." Uncle Henry, "Hey Lucas. Just a heads up. Your folks sold the house." I blinked. Reread it. Then sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. They actually did it. They sold the house. The one they once bragged about passing down for generations. The one Dad built his pride on, claiming its rising value was the family's legacy. The one Riley assumed would one day be hers, along with everything inside it. Gone. Later that week, I spoke to Uncle Henry on the phone. "They didn't tell you?" he asked, incredulous. "Nope. They've moved into one of those cramped duplex rentals on the east side. Not pretty. Riley's losing her mind." I smirked. "Yeah, I figured the princess wouldn't do well without a palace. She's been screaming at your dad nonstop. Blaming everyone but herself, of course. And the sale? Below market. They were behind on utilities, your dad's medical bills. It was desperate. For a second, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered Riley's words at Thanksgiving. I remembered Mom saying, "You barely help us," after I covered thousands in medical bills. I remembered Dad saying, "You chose that job," when I brought up how exhausted I was. And just like that, any flicker of sympathy vanished. They weren't victims. They were architects of their own downfall. A few days later, it was Riley's turn to implode. I'd just come home from work, still in my white coat, when I heard a knock. Not the hesitant kind. The aggressive, entitled kind. Riley. Of course. I opened the door and she barged in like she owned the place, tossing her knockoff designer purse onto my couch like it was still the family living room. "You ruined everything," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. "Hello to you too." She whirled on me, her cheeks flushed, voice shaking, not from sadness, but fury. "We had a plan, Lucas. Mom and Dad were supposed to leave me the house, and I." "You what?" I asked, stepping closer. "You were going to live there forever, or sell it for quick cash?" Her silence gave her away. She tried to change the subject. "You don't get it. They're miserable. Dad's health is worse. Mom's crying all the time. And I'm finally learning what it feels like to take responsibility?" I finished. She glared at me. "You think you're better than us because you've got money. Because you wear a lab coat and act like you're God's gift to the world." I exhaled slowly. "No, Riley. I think I'm better because I worked for everything I have. Because I bled, sweated, and cried through years of school, training, and overnight shifts while you played the victim and pretended your laziness was just figuring yourself out. Her face crumpled. You're cruel. No, I said. I'm done. I pointed toward the door. Get out. She opened her mouth again, some final insult, no doubt, but I shut the door behind her before I had to hear it. She didn't knock again. 2 days later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. But the message was exactly what I expected. Lucas, she said, voice trembling, we lost the house. Your father's sick again. The bills are too much. Please. Please call me. We can talk. You don't have to pay for everything. Just let us stay with you for a little while. Just until we figure things out. I replayed the message once, just to hear the desperation in her voice again. Then I deleted it. And then, the silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Not eerie. Not fragile. It felt earned. I sat in my living room that night, lights dimmed, a warm meal in front of me, one I didn't have to share, one I didn't have to rush through in order to send money, respond to an emergency, or take a guilt-ridden call. The city buzzed outside my window, but inside, everything was still. Everything was mine. Weeks passed. I traveled. For the first time in years, I took a real vacation. Booked a flight to Japan, stayed in a quiet ryokan in Kyoto, walked through ancient temples and ate sushi that melted on my tongue like silk. No surprise family emergencies. No phone buzzing mid-trip demanding I Venmo $800 for the heating. When I returned home, I upgraded my apartment. Bought new furniture. Invested in a second property. Started setting aside money, not for my parents' insurance or Riley's overdrafts, but for my own future. And I slept. God, I slept. Not that anxious, half-awake kind of sleep. The kind where you wake up and actually feel rested. I didn't miss them. Not their voices. Not their guilt. Not their manipulation. Until one day, just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. A text. Unknown number. Lucas. It's Mom. Please call me. It's important. I stared at it for a long time. And I realized something. Important, to them, always meant urgent for their needs. It never meant urgent for mine. It never meant we're worried about you. It never meant thank you. It never meant we're sorry. So I turned the phone over, screen facing down. And I poured myself a glass of wine. Because the collapse of their dynasty wasn't my burden anymore. It was their lesson. And my liberation. It's funny what happens when people who've always had a safety net suddenly realize the ground beneath them is solid concrete. The silence didn't last. It never does with people like my family, people who don't know how to survive without someone else to lean on. Or rather, someone else to bleed dry. It had been a little over a month since they sold the house and moved into a rundown rental Riley probably considered a humanitarian crisis. I hadn't spoken to any of them since I kicked Riley out of my apartment and deleted my mom's voicemail without replying. And then, right on cue, it happened. Another message. Unknown number. Mom's in the hospital. Please. Just call me. I didn't respond right away. I sat on my couch, staring at my coffee table, where an unopened book on Mediterranean architecture sat next to a cup of herbal tea. A quiet night. My quiet night. I had just come back from work, not an emergency shift, but a regular one. Balanced. Calm. For once. I thought about the message. And I realized. I felt nothing. Not fear. Not guilt. Not sadness. Just. Nothing. And that scared me more than anything else ever had. 10 minutes later, I called back. I know what you're thinking. After everything, I still picked up the phone. But here's the thing about people like me, we were raised to fix things. And part of healing is realizing when that instinct is helpful. And when it's just you playing janitor for someone else's mess. Riley answered. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. She collapsed, she said. Blood pressure spike. Heart rate through the roof. They're running tests. I stayed quiet. She asked for you, Riley added, softer now. Said your name. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, I'm not coming. Riley sucked in a breath like I'd hit her. You're really going to do this? I'm not doing anything, I said. You made your choices. She did too. She's our mother. And I was her paycheck, I replied. Now the account's closed. She's sick, Lucas. I'm tired, Riley. Her voice cracked. But you're a doctor. You care about people. I care about patients, I corrected. Not people who spent years using me and then tossed me aside the second I stopped being convenient. You're heartless, she whispered. No, I said, voice like ice. I'm healed. Then I hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, but because I was processing something deeper. There's this shift that happens when you finally say no and mean it, not just to their faces, but in your soul. The shift when you realize you've stopped seeking their approval. When their crisis is no longer your emergency. That's when you get your life back. And that's when they lose their grip. A week later, I ran into Uncle Henry again. He met me for lunch at a quiet place downtown, where the server knew my name and brought me chamomile tea without asking. She's out of the hospital, he said after the food arrived. They're managing. Barely. I nodded, slicing into my roasted chicken. And? He shrugged. They're staying at some cheap rental on the outskirts. It's not good. Moldy walls. Riley hates it. She should, I said flatly. She earned it. He raised his glass slightly. To karma. We clinked. By the third month, the reality hit them full force. No one wanted to help anymore. Not the relatives they'd burned bridges with. Not the old family friends who used to smile politely at their parties. Not the neighbors who watched the moving truck pull away from the house they thought the Carters would own forever. And certainly not me. I had become the ghost at the table, present in their memory only when something needed fixing. But now that I was gone, the cracks in their fantasy had widened. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a new number. I almost didn't answer. But I was curious. Lucas, my mother's voice came through, weak, hoarse. I know you don't want to hear from me. But we're out of options. I didn't say anything. Your father. He's trying to find work. Riley's looking too. We can't keep the lights on. Still, I said nothing. I was thinking, she went on, maybe just until things stabilize. Maybe we could stay with you. You have a big apartment. Just for a little while. I smiled grimly. So now you want to live with the son who doesn't help. We were wrong, she said quietly. I see that now. No, I said. You don't. You're just afraid. That's not fair. You're right, I said. Fair would have been not choosing one child to love while using the other like a walking debit card. A pause. Please, Lucas. You already took enough from me, I whispered. You don't get to take my peace too. I ended the call. This time, I didn't feel nothing. I felt closure. I started seeing a therapist after that. Not because I was breaking, but because I was finally ready to build something new. Something that wasn't held together by guilt and obligation. We talked about trauma. About family systems. About narcissism and enmeshment. But mostly, we talked about identity. How would you describe yourself, she asked me once, if you removed your family from the picture? I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, free. Now, when I walk into my apartment, I don't check my phone for crisis texts. When payday rolls around, I don't flinch at how much is left after I wire money to someone else. When I take a day off, I actually rest. I don't dream about them anymore. I don't worry if they're okay. I don't wonder what they'll say when I finally show up again. Because I won't. I still hear updates now and then. Apparently, Riley is struggling to find work. Dad's health is up and down. Mom still tells people I'm too busy to visit, as if my absence is a scheduling issue and not a boundary she helped write in blood. But me? I just booked a month-long trip to Iceland. I've started painting again. Something I gave up in med school to work overtime and pay for the family's emergencies. I've started living again. Not for them. For me. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I walked out of their lives and closed the door behind me, for good. No half promises. No we'll talk later. No guilt-ridden check-ins or weak moments of compromise. Just silence. And freedom. I didn't know peace could be so quiet. At first, it felt unnatural, like something was missing. I'd conditioned myself for years to be constantly alert. Not for emergencies in the medical sense, but family emergencies, the kind where I'd get a 2 a.m. message that said power got shut off, can you help? Or Riley maxed her card again, it's just $500. Those messages don't come anymore. Neither does the manipulation, the expectations, or the fake affection that always came with strings attached. It's almost like my phone had been possessed for years by ghosts who pretended to love me when they needed something. And then I exorcised them. After that final call from my mother, I expected they'd make one last desperate push. Some dramatic stunt to win sympathy, like sending me a childhood photo or a long letter blaming their behavior on the stress of aging. But none came. I think, deep down, they knew. This time, I really meant it. I wasn't just drawing a line in the sand. I was building a wall and planting a garden on the other side. My therapist once asked me, if they reached out again, and it wasn't about money, would you listen? I said no. Not because I'm cruel. But because I've finally accepted that they only miss the version of me who never said no. They don't miss me. They miss my utility. There's a difference. I got one last message a month ago. It was from Riley. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I believed it. But because of what it represented. A final attempt. A white flag raised not in surrender, but in desperation. I opened it. Lucas. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want to say. I get it now. I see what I did, and I see what they did. We used you. I used you. And when you finally said enough, we acted like you were the villain. You weren't. You were the only one who ever tried. I don't expect a reply. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Riley. For a brief second, something in me softened. And then I remembered Thanksgiving. Her smug face as she clinked glasses, knowing she was getting everything. Her silence as I walked out. Her voice, cold as steel, when she called me petty. And I realized, apologies don't undo patterns. They don't erase years of decisions. And sometimes, they're just tools used when manipulation stops working. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. These days, I don't measure my worth by how many people depend on me. I measure it by how deeply I sleep. How fully I laugh. How long I can go without checking my phone in fear. I'm not ashamed of how much I gave. I'm proud of it. But I'm also proud that I stopped. The money I used to send to them every month now goes toward building a life I actually enjoy. I furnished my apartment the way I like, minimalist, warm tones, art I picked out without needing anyone's approval. I started hiking again. I adopted a dog. His name's Milo. He's a rescue, and ironically, he's taught me more about loyalty than my entire family ever did. I signed up for a photography class. It was something I always wanted to do when I was younger, but I never had the time, or the freedom, to indulge in anything that wasn't productive or responsible. Now? I take pictures for me. No one else. People ask me if I feel lonely. Here's the truth. No. I felt lonelier sitting at that Thanksgiving table, surrounded by people who saw me as a walking credit card, than I ever have sitting alone with a glass of wine and a book on my balcony. Being alone isn't the same as being unloved. Sometimes it's just safe. I still get messages. Random ones from distant cousins who heard the version of the story my parents spun. They ask, what happened? Or say things like maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I don't bother explaining. Because if someone wasn't there when I was giving everything, they don't get to weigh in now that I've stopped. I tell people this when they're afraid to walk away from toxic families. It's not about revenge. It's not about punishment. It's about peace. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. And you cannot grow in soil that drains you instead of nourishing you. I stopped being angry at them a long time ago. Now? I'm just done. They'll survive. Maybe not comfortably. Maybe not happily. But they'll survive. Just not on my back anymore. And me? I'm finally living. I used to think freedom was something you bought. But it's not. It's something you reclaim. And this peace I live in now? It was expensive. It cost me guilt. It cost me obligation. It cost me the illusion of a family I never truly had. But damn. It was worth every penny.